Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the call, FlexFam call. I know we have a bunch of people who mentioned that they are going to be listening in off their camera because they're out doing stuff. Totally fine if you are listening in. Oh, sorry. As you come in, just make sure you keep yourself muted so we can limit the background noise for the recording. There we go. Okay, I think we're good there. If you're listening in and you're off video or you have questions that come up, feel free to mention them in the chat. We do have a few questions today related to periodization. I know we had a full periodization a few weeks ago, so we're going to do a little bit of periodization today, probably about 20 to 25 minutes of periodization. And then we do have a question surrounding fat loss specifically, and a few things I want to touch on with that, because I know we have quite a few people in fat loss phases or going into fat loss phases. And then just to kind of start off, I do have some notes here on a few quick reminders, just kind of general reminders. Oops, sorry, I'm just letting one more person in here. There we go. So first things, we do have the new training phase that just came out. So if anybody does have any questions on that, I know there's a few people who started asking questions in the group, which is great. I would rather you ask me than guess or second guess yourself. So thank you everyone or anybody who has asked questions so far. I do try to record that intro video and try to cover everything, but there are things that I missed. There's things that maybe I made confusing. So please always, if you're second guessing anything or you just have any follow-up questions at all, please feel free to ask. And the second thing with that is form feedback videos. So we haven't done many form feedback videos in the past month or so. So just remember that that is still an option, especially with newer movements in this phase. If you're trying out a new movement or bringing a movement in that you haven't done in a while, definitely get some feedback, right? Especially if it's something where it's one of the main compound movements, any type of squats or deadlifts or anything like that, and really any movement at all. That's part of this, right? So going over those things, getting a little bit of feedback can go a really long way. So I definitely encourage you, if you're, if you need any feedback or anything at all, just easily just put that phone. I like to prop it up against my water bottle like this in selfie mode, or just like in a shoe, put it on selfie mode, hit record, and it's as easy as that. To kind of take a form video. And the tips and things like that are in the category under training, the exercise form submissions category. So check that out for tips there. And then I think last quick thing I had, again, just another reminder, I like to say this every month or so, you get out of this program what you put into it. So if you have questions surrounding anything, please ask. I love answering questions. I love helping as much as I can, but I can't read your mind. So please ask questions. And with that too, anybody who's new, so Alyssa had asked a great question about cholesterol last week, and we talked a little bit about that, and it kind of prompted me to go in and do some more research and put together kind of like a cholesterol 101 article, because there's so much out there around cholesterol. I'm not an expert, but I have researched it before. I have stayed up to date on the research, so I can, share that in hopefully a forum that makes sense and is giving you some practical takeaways. So that is just kind of, again, just reminding you that if you ask questions, it may lead to certain lessons or things like that. But I want to know what you're interested in and what you want to know. So please, keep me posted on that. And then lastly, I'll stop rambling, but with that said too, we do have a bunch of articles or lessons, whatever you want to call them, in the FlexFam already that have come out of questions that people have asked over the past few years. If there's anything in there that you would like me to talk about on a Zoom call, or sort of, I know there's a lot of information, right? And it's sometimes it's hard to, even when you're kind of given all this information, it's hard to actually go in and like read through it. It takes effort. It takes time to do that. So I completely understand. So if there's anything that you're like, hey, if we could just maybe review this article for the first 10 minutes of the Zoom call this week, I'm curious about X, Y, and Z. That definitely do that. I want to, again, break things down as easy as possible for you to understand. And also to help, guide that side of things from like the education learning perspective. So hopefully that all makes sense. Does anybody have any questions on any of that, or any questions on the new training phase? Comments, questions, concerns? Has anybody, I know I've seen a few people have gone through the first day or two.
I have a question. I haven't gone through it yet. Can you hear me? Oops, sorry.
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. I haven't gone through, but my concern is like day 4 the leg one, because if I'm struggling with this one because the fact that it has like the hip extension one, which of course I have to use the barbell setup, and then RDLs, and I'm like, I can't switch between back and forth and reset up and that one. Now I thought there was another one that I was going to struggle with. So that one's concerned. So then I will use the trap bar, I think, to do the RDLs.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Or no, and then I was going to give up the hip extension and just do thrusts. Was the other option for me, because
those are two actually. Option 1 and option 2 would be exactly what I recommend. So either using the trap bar for the 6 reps of RDLs and then putting the barbell to do the hip extension, or instead of doing the 45-degree hip extension, or in your case, the barbell hip extension, you can do the hip thrusts, which you will have to switch out. That's another thing though. The RDLs and the hip thrusts is one barbell too. So to be most efficient, I would probably choose to do the trap bar RDLs, and then use the barbell to do either the extension or the hip thrust. Does that make sense?
I was just curious. Yeah, I was just curious how you people that go to public gyms manages. I'm struggling at home and I have nobody waiting on me. So I think Zoe asked that comment. I was like, I looked at it. I'll figure it out. But kudos to you ladies is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's also, I mean, I definitely had that in mind when I was programming this as well. And some of these, the trisets that I did program, if you look at some of the videos, for example, like the quad, I forgot what it's called, triple quad death or something, I'm actually doing that in my gym. And so what I did is I just used like a squat rack because I was doing front squats, and I brought over the dumbbells and the plates that I was already using too. So you can just, set up an area in the gym. And if you're using the squat rack and someone wants to use the squat rack, like in between your sets, right? You could absolutely just set up to the side. And if someone's coming over to you and they're like, hey, like I want to use a squat rack, and I notice like you're doing supersets, or trisets or whatever, and you're taking a 5-minute rest, whatever it may be, they can absolutely work in. And that's like enough time to do that if they want. But that's an easy way to do it. And then if there's any cable movements or cable trisets, the easiest thing with that is to just, again, bring over a bench or dumbbells, a bench and dumbbells to that cable rack, and either set it up on the side or like maybe off to the side. And you can kind of do that as well. And then if that doesn't work, if you're in a super busy gym and you don't want to do that, or things are on opposite sides, that's why we have all of the alternative options to choose from. Does anybody have any questions on setting up things? Zoe, I know that I see that you're unmuted, so I didn't know. Oh, Jamie has a question too. Sorry, I'm looking at who's unmuted to see who might have a question. So Jamie, I see you're unmuted.
Yes. So I've only I made it through the first 2 days and got to the leg day and split squats. I don't have plates yet. I'm actually saving to like get like a all-encompassing gym setup, but so I had to I went to like a Bulgarian split squat with the hill elevated And I just noticed a lot with this has a lot of hill elevated stuff, which I have never done before. So this is all fairly new to me with elevating the hills. But I keep getting like a lower back pain, and I don't know if I'm just like sucking at the hill elevated or if I'm doing something wrong. But it's just my lower side. My right side is totally fine, and I have some like nerve damage on my left side, and it doesn't typically bother me, but I felt like quite a bit of pain. It didn't last like after I finished and everything, it's been fine. I just wanted to know like high level in your experience if there's anything that maybe I'm doing weird that would create that. And Bulgarian split squats may be my least favorite. I love to exercise. It's like my favorite part of this, and I loathe Bulgarian split.
It's I totally hear you. I mean, I think everybody has a love-hate relationship with them. Like they're
Yeah.
great because they're working. It's like a hybrid movement where you're isolating one side, but at the same time you're still working both sides. Which is hard to do. It's like a combo of a bilateral and unilateral movement. So you're getting like all the good stuff, but that makes it really, really hard, right?
Yes.
So I would say based off what you said though, so you said you're only getting the pain in the one side, and that's the side that you've
Yeah.
had nerve issues with before?
Yeah, I have autoimmunity, so I have like it's kind of similar to MS. It's not quite. It's actually more rare than MS, I guess. And so I got some nerve damage just from having some relapses in my past. So I do know just in general that the left side is not as strong, even more so than the normal imbalances that people have. Lunges tend to be harder for me. Like anything
Hmm.
lunging is probably harder. Like squats are easier because you can just drop back on your heels and you can put your weight there. It's just a lot easier for me. But when I get into the lunges, it's definitely harder. I don't typically feel the pain that I was feeling in my lower back though with the hill elevated. So I was just curious if I'm sure it's form related
Yeah,
to
so
figure it
first
out.
things I'm going to say is just as I've said, I usually say this to everybody. If there's something that you're concerned about form related,
Yeah.
absolutely, that would definitely be time to take a video, pop it in the app, and then we can kind of review that because that will just, instead of me just guessing, then that allows me to kind of
Yeah.
really see and give you kind of live feedback there. But also just kind of based off what you're saying, you could be just like putting yourself in a position where it is causing a little bit more stress on those specific nerves, especially if it's the one side and that's the side that you've had issues with in the past. It just sounds like you're probably putting stress on the way that your body's positioned with the heel elevation. It might just be
Hmm.
putting stress on on an area that for you personally, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I would, instead of kind of like, you don't want to push through that, especially if it's a pain type thing.
Yeah.
I would play around with your setup. Maybe instead of doing heel elevation, maybe you just do elevation, right? So instead of having a
Okay.
like your heel elevated, maybe you just think about elevating either if it's on plates or a box, or stacks of books, whatever you have available. Just try
Hmm.
that elevation and don't elevate your heel and see if you have relief there because you're still going to be able to get a lot of knee flexion. And I
Okay.
know with some people too, sometimes the heel elevation in conjunction with the elevation itself, like both elevating your front foot and then also elevating your heel, sometimes it doesn't feel
Yeah.
as good. So you don't have to do that, right? Again, everybody is different. I would just think about, okay, how can I get as much knee flexion as possible, knee bend, meaning how can I push my knee as far over my toe as possible with comfort, right? And when
Yeah.
I say comfort, that means, relative to a split squat being not very comfortable at
Yeah.
all.
It's not not the most
Yeah.
comfort, but
But
yeah.
yeah, but pain, like you don't want to have tingling or any type of like nerve sensations that
Yeah.
are happening. So I would think about playing around with that. And then you can also play around with the height too. Um,
Okay.
and you should be able to find something that's, you know,
Just a
comfortable
little
where you're
bit more
not feeling
doable.
pain. Yeah. And then if you can't, again, that's the first thing I would do. I would definitely take a video as well so you can kind of look at your form. And then if it just doesn't work, like if a front foot elevated split squat is just not working for you, then there's absolutely other movements that we can plug in there.
Okay.
But I would give it a
Yeah,
few
I'll keep
tries.
trying because I was excited to do the foot elevated stuff, and it was weird because there was three things in it that the just regular like loaded squat, like back rack squat, I could do fine. Like it didn't bother
Mhm.
me. Both feet were planted, But when we did the cyclist squat, like the more like what I call a suitcase squat, almost looked like,
Yeah.
but hill elevated, I could feel it then, and then with the Bulgarian. So I'll play around with the movements and stuff and see if I can figure out. And then secrets on how to get your like filming yourself when you're by yourself, like 90% of the time. I tried to do it the other day, and I was like, this is a disaster. So any
Yeah.
of you ladies have tips on that, send them my way because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would so just going back again, everything you're saying is kind of like clicking in my head. So again, it sounds like it's the heel elevation. It doesn't sound like it's like the 1 foot. It sounds like it's just heel elevation in general. You're probably just putting yourself, maybe it's the plantar flexion, and then the way that you're positioned just might not work for you. So again, play around with it, maybe nix the heel elevation. And then in terms of recording yourself, you don't have to buy anything fancy. You can just, like I said, what I do is I put my phone on selfie mode, right? This is my background. It's my dog. I have a tripod. So I do this for a living. So I have and
have like
I have clients though who literally
I
use
have a tripod.
tripods. Okay, there you go.
Tripod.
Yeah. And you can get it for like $10 on Amazon. Keep it in your gym bag. Super simple. Pop your phone up on that and then just put it in position and press record. One trick for
I have one for my camera, so I'll see if it'll work. I don't know if it'll do, but I'll look at it.
Yeah, if not, I'll post. They have tripods on Amazon that you can just like for your phone. They're like 10 or $15. And then a quick trick if you want to record. And I'm spending a little time on this because this is important not just for sending form feedbacks to me, but you should be like everybody here should be recording themselves at least, especially when you're starting a new movement, or if you're just feeling like you're not sure if your form is looking good. How will you know unless you see yourself do it, right? So everybody here at some point should be recording themselves with their lifts. It doesn't have to be every lift, doesn't have to be every workout, but I promise you it will help you get better because you can literally just pop your phone up, record, and then during your rest period, this is what I do. Like when I'm resting in between the sets, I will look at my recording and be like, okay, how does my form look? Is there something that I can tweak for the next set? That's going to help you to progress. If you don't see yourself in live time doing it, and you shouldn't be looking in the mirror while you're lifting at all, that's absolutely not what you want to do. But looking back at it is very, very important. That's going to help you excel. One quick tip, if you listen to music and you want to record yourself in selfie mode, the way that you do that is you go, if you have an iPhone, I'm not sure how to do it on any other device. Sorry, I only use an iPhone. Don't go to the video, right? So you can go to photo and you can go to video. Don't go to the video. Keep it in photo mode. And you're going to put it in photo selfie mode, like you're taking a selfie, and you're going to hold down the button in the middle and swipe to the right, and it will start recording as if it's a video, but it will continue to play your music in the background. So that's a little tip if you don't like shutting your music off during your lifts, which I hate doing. Just use the photo mode, swipe to the right, and it will record as a video. Make sense?
Awesome. Yep. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other question? Oh, we've got some things going on in the chat here. Lauren said she keeps a mini tripod in her gym bag. Absolutely. And yeah, so lots of people are using tripods. I mean, they're great, super easy, cheap. Definitely less less annoying than having to record a video and prop it up on your water bottle and then realize that you were literally recording like your toe in the whole video. I've done that many times. So yeah, definitely invest in a tripod would be my recommendation. Any other questions on this training phase, form, anything at all?
I have a quick question, Rachel. This is Addie.
Yep. Hey.
So I'm trying, as like the past couple, what do you call them, phases that we've been doing, I'm trying to like, of course, build, each week, like try to add more weight. So am I supposed to, because I think in one of the videos that I watched, you were like try to stick with the same weight for all 3 sets. And then theoretically, you're going to go down in weight each set, and that'll kind of help you determine if you should go up the next week, which
Mhm.
for the most part, that works. But there's sometimes where like, I can't like, it's annoying. It's usually like the really small muscles
Mhm.
where like, if I go up, I suddenly am not able to complete like a lot of the reps. It's really annoying. So like I can do, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like it's
Lateral
usually
raises or biceps or triceps.
it lats. Like I can
Yeah.
do like 10 to 12 reps at, let's say 15 pounds. But as soon as I try to up that, and of course, as you know, at the gym, they don't have like 17.5 pounds, they have
Mhm.
20 options. So then I try to go to the 20 pound and I'm like, well, now I can only do 6 to 8 reps.
Mhm.
What do I do?
Yes, great question. Definitely, I think everybody can attest to this. It happens to me all the time. It is absolutely normal for the smaller muscle groups to, lateral raises. So like your delts, triceps, biceps, whether you're using cables, dumbbells, whatever it may be. And let's think about this like logically. They're smaller muscles, so they are not going to progress as fast as, say, bigger muscles or more compound movements where you're using multiple muscle groups, right? Versus, so, a lateral raise versus a deadlift, right? Completely two different sides of the spectrum there. So just so you know, like when I'm doing cable lateral raises or like tricep extensions or things like that, my weight stays the same for like weeks, months on end. Like I'm lucky if I can increase on those specific movements. I'm really focusing in on other ways that I can implement progressive overload. So whether that is, of course, reps, right? Going through the reps, getting to the highest rep range, focusing on my execution of that specific movement, focusing on the movement actually getting easier week to week, right? So if it gets easier, then it means that you are getting stronger, right? Within the same reps and weight. So that's the first thing I would think about, especially with the smaller muscle groups. Don't think about increasing the weight. That should be the last thing you do when it comes to like are kind of looking at progressive overload and how we can progress. That would be the last thing. Which, again, we talk about this like understanding your main goal, right? Your main goal with changing your body composition is focusing on hypertrophy training, which is focusing on creating as much tension through the muscle tissue as possible. That doesn't necessarily mean having to add weight every single week, or even, like I said, my lateral raises, I think the weight, like cable lateral raises, I'm thinking, especially like wrist height cable lateral raises, like I'm at the same weight for probably months before I get a little bit of an increase there. Or I'm switching up the movement and then coming back to it, things like that, right? So a few things here. That's the first thing. Just realize that, right? Be aware of that you don't have to be focused on the weight with those small muscle groups. The second thing is there are, especially as you said, like if you are working at a gym and they say they don't have like 17.5 pound dumbbells and you're doing dumbbell lateral raises, and that jump from 15 to 20 is a lot. Like if you look at it relatively, that's a huge percentage of a jump, even though it might not seem like, oh, I'm going from 15 pounds to 20 pounds. But if you look at it relative to everything else, like it's a big jump. So with that, there are, and I can add a link to this. They have these like mini plates that you can buy on Amazon. They're like 2.5 pound plates. I personally don't have them, but I do have some clients who have them. In my gym, we do have like 17.5, 22.5, 27.5 dumbbells. So I'm lucky to have that. But for those that don't, purchasing these they're called like micro plates. You just attach them around the dumbbells. You can also, put them around barbells, and you can also put them on the cable stack too. So that's a good option if you are just consistently struggling with this and that can probably do 17.5, for example. So that's an option, just purchasing some of those micro plates, keeping them in your gym bag. When it comes to cables, that's another thing too. Like if you are using a cable machine, and you jump up, one or go down one and it's too much, thinking about adding like micro plates, or if you have like a 2.5 pound plate in your gym, you can hook that onto the cable machine by pushing, like literally if you have a 2.5 pound plate or one of your micro plates, if you buy that, you can put it through the pin and stick it into the cable machine like that. And so it'll stay on it. So you can add weight like that without having to jump up as high. Those are kind of like the two main things. There's other kind of tips and tricks, but that's where I would probably start. Does that make sense? Oh, awesome.
Unmuting.
Yeah.
It makes sense. I think I noticed it the most the last phase because you were having us do what are they called? Whereas like you would rest and then do another 4 to 6 or something.
Rest, pause. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I'd be able to do another like 7 to 8, and I'm like, well, I should be able to go up in weight theoretically, but then I go up in weight and then I wouldn't be able to complete
Yeah.
yours. I'm out.
Yeah.
So it's like,
You're not alone. I think a lot of other ladies, there's a few people shaking their heads. Like that's just kind of part of the deal when it comes to using cables and working these smaller muscle groups. It's kind of just part of it. So I would just kind of take your thoughts away from like, okay, what's the number of weight that I'm lifting, and actually how, like, can I focus more so on the tension and maybe slowing. Again, you could that, rest, pause, set. Maybe you actually did an extra pause somewhere within the set to make it harder without actually adding weight, right? So for example, you said, you did 6 to 7 more reps or something like that. Maybe during that rest pause set, I'm just thinking about, I don't know, tricep extension, right? So you're pausing here in the lengthened position, not resting, right? Not where the weight's completely down, but you're paused with still tension here. And then you extend up, and then you come down, pause a second, and then extend up, and really focus on slowing that down rather than just like going through it, right? So manipulating the tempo is another way to add progression and add progressive overload. Because again, it's all about creating tension. It's not how much weight you lift or how fast you lift that weight. It's the tension that you're creating within the muscle tissue that's going to allow it to adapt and grow. Love all these questions. And that just, I'm going to get into some periodization and answer some of the questions that were listed here. But that's another thing that just kind of reminded me too. I know we have some people coming from powerlifting, CrossFit backgrounds, things like that. This is something that I kind of missed the mark on for years, is that, especially because I came from CrossFit and I came from triathlon. So it was all about like going as fast as you can, getting through it as fast as you can. And really it's the opposite when it comes to training to change your body composition in the most efficient way, because that's going to be building muscle. And we think about building muscle, we're not thinking about moving a weight from point A to point B like you would in CrossFit if you're doing like deadlifts or power cleans or something to get through the reps as fast as possible. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to think about, how can I move that weight through the range of motion with the most, I want to say like control, and creating as much tension within that tissue, right? Versus just thinking about moving the weight from A to B. And I want to caveat this with saying it's not that you want to move the weight as slow as possible, right? That's not what I'm saying. Because if you've read, some of, we talked about this before, when you go through like the concentric motion, right? So lifting the dumbbell up on a bicep curl versus lowering it. When you're lifting it up, you don't want to lift it up as slow as possible, right? You want to lift it up explosively. Explosively does coincide with fast, but it's not where you're lifting up and you're like using the rest of your body. How can you lift that weight up in a controlled fashion explosively with only using your biceps, right? And not letting other muscles come to the picture. That's what we're focused on. And then on the eccentric, the lowering phase, I'm just using a bicep curl as an example. How can I control that as much as possible, knowing that, for example, gravity is working against me, to slow it down on the eccentric? But it doesn't have to be as slow as possible, but just having, again, the control and creating tension within the muscle. So again, it's just thinking about like, instead of how can I get through this set as fast as possible? Or how can I lift this weight as fast as possible? Think about how can I create as much tension as possible, and get the most out of this single rep as possible. I just said that as possible 5 times in a row. But when you shift your mindset, it kind of, you start to focus on some different things, and you'll start to realize that you actually get a lot more out of your workout, right? You're not just going through the motions. You're not just showing up. There's going to be some days where you just got to show up, right? Every workout's not going to be amazing, but on those days where you do feel really good, you're feeling into it, focus on those little things, because I promise you, you'll get way more bang for your buck when it comes to muscle building and change your body composition from that versus like trying to get through things as fast as possible. Okay, that was a rant. Does that all make sense though? Thumbs up for those on video. Okay, awesome. And then in the chat, Suzanne said that was very helpful. Awesome. Glad to hear that. All right, so we have a few questions here that I want to get to. So Ryan is on here. Yeah, so Ryan had a question a few weeks ago that we didn't get to during the periodization lesson, but I want to chat about now. I'm going to post the question in the chat, Ryan, because it was a little bit of a longer question, so I want everybody to read it. But do you want to just kind of maybe just ask your question now, since it's been a few weeks? I know it was around, the vacation and whether you should, in terms of periodization, whether you should plan your 10-day trip that you have, within your fat loss phase or at a different time.
Yeah, but basically I plan to do an 8-week fat loss. And I had thought I would do it to where I would be through reverse and into maintenance for our trip. But I really like to be able to, like we took a vacation in January and it was during maintenance. And even though I didn't really suffer any consequences from it, I just felt like I did, sort of. So my thinking was, if I just took a diet break during that trip and then came back and finished like the last 4 weeks or something through there of fat loss, then it kind of, it would allow me to put the fat loss phase off a little further. Instead of starting at mid-June, it would be, I'm thinking late July. So that gives me a little bit more time in maintenance. And then B, it's kind of just the whole mental thing for me. Like I can come home from this trip that's going to be pretty food focused and come back. And not that I know I'd just be in like a break. So it's not like I plan to just go crazy or anything like that. But yeah, I'd say every day I'm going to eat something that normally I wouldn't. So my thoughts are come home and just kind of get right back into, a 4-week fat loss and kind of undo it. That's how I'm thinking of it.
Gotcha. No, that makes complete sense. And I think this is something that, I have definitely gone through. And I think it all does come back to just also understanding that like the more you go through these things with time, like the more vacations you go on, the more travel you do within different phases, right? You said you've traveled within fat loss and you've kind of experienced that. You've traveled within maintenance, you've experienced that. And the one thing I'll say about the maintenance is that it is absolutely, and this goes for everything, that it's absolutely normal for maintenance for there to be periods of time, especially going back from vacation, where you potentially feel a little bit fluffier or you feel like you've gained weight, right? Or things like that. Versus when you're in fat loss, it's like your body's in a deficit. You're not typically holding on to lots of water weight, things like that, right? So there is a huge mental component to this. And it is something that it's like a thing that you will work through over time, right? So I'm going to give you some tips here, but I'm just saying that from a general standpoint is that it's one of those things where you kind of have to just continue to trust that you will learn from the experiences and then eventually get to the point where you're like, okay, I can go on vacation and I don't even have to worry about it. Like, I'm not going to track my macros, my calories. I'm just going to be present. I'm not going to think about my my training, and I'm going to be totally fine when I get back, even if the scale's up a few pounds. And I can confidently say that that's the place that I have been in for the past 2 years. But before that, the prior 5 years, I was not there. I was always kind of still trying to figure it out, learning as I went, learning from like, okay, what worked, what didn't, you know, being able to pull back a little bit or sometimes have to be more strict, right? So I just want to kind of say that from the beginning. But to your point, I think this does come back to thinking about, for you personally, what you like, making the decision on the past of what's happened in the past for you, what you found to be like, to have you come out of something more confident. And so it sounds like for you going, and this, you know, I don't want to use the term undo, right? So you mentioned like undo what happened during the vacation, because if we think about that mindset, then it's more so like we're saying like, oh, we messed up, or we didn't have control, or you're not confident in the decisions you made. And going into a vacation or travel or a trip like that with that mindset will cause you to feel a lot more stress, a lot more guilt, versus going into it with a plan where you're like, okay, I'm like, no matter what the plan is, you're like, okay, I'm doing this for a reason, whether it's I'm not tracking any food, I'm just going to walk and not lift, right? That's my plan. If you fall through with that plan and you're staying within your own boundaries, then you will come out of that feeling accomplished because you've executed on your plan. But if you go into the vacation with a plan of tracking every little thing, you know, being very, very meticulous, typically that's where we come out of it and we're like, okay, now I feel more guilty because I actually didn't follow through with all that. So it's going into it, and these are just random examples, but just going into it with that mindset of like, okay, this is my plan, this is what I want to do, and making sure it's realistic, right? So with that being said, Ryan, if you know that kind of the past 2 experiences you've had, you have been able to maybe feel more confident and in control with doing, like, say, you know, having this vacation as a diet break in your fat loss phase, then that might be the route to go this time, just to kind of, again, test it out and assess, and knowing that it did work pretty well for you in the past, and not saying that you have to do this forever, but that's something that I would just kind of think about. And then also, like you said, the thing that sticks in my mind that you said is like, it allows you to stay in maintenance longer to be able to, you know, focus more on building and nourishing and fueling yourself. So also the last thing is the way that, like, as you ask that question, I could kind of hear it in your voice, what, like, you kind of answered your own question. And I could hear that you were more confident in the second route versus the first. And that's mostly what I care about, right? Like being confident in that, but also knowing that like maybe in a year from now, we have to kind of switch things up and try, you know, feeling more confident through like the maintenance side of things. Does that make sense? I know it was a little confusing at the end.
No, it does. Yeah. And you're right on the word undo. That's actually not what I mean. I just can't come up with the right
Mhm.
word to explain what
I
I'm.
understand.
But you're right. Like confidence. If I just focused on that, I do feel like I would be more confident with it as a diet break. I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that I would. So as long as you don't have any like, you know, very like there's a very real reason not to do it that way or do it one way versus the other, then yeah, that makes
Yeah, again, as long as you're going into it with the mindset of like, I'm doing this as a plan. I'm not, you know, I'm not doing this because I want, like you said, undo things. It's more so like, this is my plan. This works better from an overall standpoint of all the other things I'm doing as well. That's how I would kind of look at it. But I also want you to remember what you said when you went through a vacation on maintenance. You came back feeling like you, quote unquote, did some damage, but like after you looked at maybe the numbers for a month or 2, you realize that you didn't do any damage, right? You realize that your body composition maintained where it maintained, right? So in your head, you're like, oh, I ate all this stuff and I didn't do any of this stuff and I gained a bunch of weight. But the reality is you didn't, because you settled back into your normal routine. You got right back into it, getting back into normal maintenance afterwards, and things balance themselves out. So I would also think about that too. Look at the data there, because the data doesn't lie, right? That's why we track all these things. The objective metrics don't lie. And so relying on your feelings and your subjective, that's why things can get super confusing, because there's a huge, huge mental aspect of all of the things that we're doing. And so that's why I'm so, just always pushing using your tracker and using this objective metrics, so you can literally see the differences over time versus relying on your feelings, because your feelings will lie to you. Even looking in the mirror, your own eyes will lie to you. I promise you. It's just part of it's just part of it. There's no other way I can explain it. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. We have.
I can add to
oh,
that too, because like I said,
please.
like last week I was in New Orleans, so there was no tracking per se. I mean, I was going out, it was work, so you had to go out for suppers and stuff. You had those beignets and, pecan pies. And I was like, oh my God, I'm coming back. I'm going to be 100 pounds overweight. This is so off. I came back, nothing changed. And yeah, I felt fluffier, but within a day of being back in routine, it was just gone. It's like amazing now. And my weight changed, nothing. Like, it's just incredible now. So
Love
I
it.
wouldn't be too scared.
Yep. It's trusting in and again, this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Nicole's been here since the beginning of the Flex Fam. So she has gone through several phases. You have to, it's really does come back to like going through these things, giving it time, being able to experience it, realize like what maybe mistakes you made and learning from those, or just, again, the failures, that's all what you're going to learn from. I'm not saying that everybody's going to fail, but everybody is going to fail eventually. I fail every day. But you learn from it, and that's part of the process, right? So yeah, thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing that too. 100% agree. And we'll definitely continue to chat about this, because I think it's something everybody struggles with. It's very, very common. Okay, so I want to go over, Nancy is here. Nancy, are you here? Yeah, Nancy's here. So she posted her periodization. I want to talk about this just to give Nancy some feedback, and then also kind of talk about something that I noticed as I was kind of reading through her periodization that I think is important. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see the Flex Fam here? Give me a thumbs up just so I know it's the right screen. Okay, hold on. I can only see. Sorry, I can't see anybody's video. Thumbs up, whoever's listening, it's right screen. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, so this is Nancy's periodization. Nancy, are you here? I know she's listening in.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So I won't read through all of this, but basically Nancy is, well, I'll read the first paragraph because this one stood out to me. Nancy is, first attempt at periodization, which from first attempt looks great. She is starting her ultracycling training during foundations and still trying to figure out her maintenance calories. She mentioned her training is increasing every week and calories have also gone up. Overall, she's lost a couple pounds during the first few weeks, but it's starting to basically balance back out, and saying that the weight loss was probably due to just fluid fluctuation with the increased training, which makes sense. So that's kind of the first kind of thing that I'll talk about, is when we're manipulating several variables at once. This is, again, why definitely spending time in foundations is important. So I'm glad, Nancy, that you're kind of taking that first step. It's like, okay, knowing that if we are trying to kind of figure some things out, the more variables we add to the mix, the more complex it's going to make it, right? So I was just talking to Jamie, we were talking about like electrolytes, for example. If you're going to, or any supplement, if you're going to add in a supplement, no matter what supplement it is, and you're trying to figure out if it's helping you or not helping you, you want to figure that out from that one supplement first, and you want to bring it in and keep it in for a few weeks before adding or adding more supplements or changing things up, because how will you know then, right? Like you're just going to confuse yourself if you have multiple variables. So obviously in real life, there's going to be lots of variables, but the more we can try to control those, the better off we're going to be from this side of things. So definitely, Nancy, as your training is ramping up and you're trying to figure out your calories there and you're expending a bit more energy than maybe you were before, that's going to definitely affect kind of calorie intake and things like that. So that's the first thing I'll say, just in terms of that. And you may find, Nancy, that it takes a bit longer. Like I know your periodization, looking to start the fat loss phase at the end of April. So just again, using these next few weeks to really kind of dial that in as much as possible and try to see things balance out. And you'll be confident, right? You'll know when you kind of feel confident in that. So when things do start to balance out with your training, the only thing I would say is that, like, Nancy, this is a question for you. Is your training going to significantly increase again throughout this next month, or pretty much
So-
level off?
I guess I misspoke when I said my training was gradually increasing. It was on the training plan, but just due to work and some other factors, it actually was the hours I was training was consistent for the last 3 weeks. So now it will start increasing because I plan on missing a lot of training. But it will go up probably an additional like 5 hours per week.
Okay. So, okay, it's good to know. I mean, 5 hours per week, it's not, I wouldn't say that's like a crazy amount in terms of like calorie burn. Probably going to be a little bit more, but not like if it was 5 hours a day, for example, right? So just kind of paying attention to that and using this next month to kind of continue to balance that out and figure that out. It might just mean like a few, maybe like an extra 100 calories a day, test that out, right? See how that goes for the next few weeks. And just kind of playing around with that. The other thing I'll say too is, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to know your perfect maintenance number, right? Because it's always going to be a range. You don't have to know that to go into a fat loss phase, right? Give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm just going to close my door. My dog's barking. So you don't have to know, like, this is my exact maintenance or this is my exact maintenance range. It's good to have an idea of it, especially because, coming out, again, data, right? Coming out of the fat loss phase, you want to have an idea of what your maintenance was before. So, okay, I'm, depending on how much you lose, if it's only, like you said, you're only looking to lose about 5 pounds, that your maintenance isn't going to change that much, right? Versus someone who lost 20 pounds, their maintenance would probably come down a bit just because they're a smaller person. They're a smaller version of themselves, which means just in general, living, gravity, you person on earth, whatever, you're a smaller version of yourself. So you will need less calories to maintain that smaller version. But besides the point there. So, okay. So we got that in check in terms of just figuring that out and potentially giving it a little bit more time. And then this kind of brings me into the second thing, because you did mention that you were unsure here. You said, I was a little unsure if I should be doing more of a body recomp with my ultra training instead of fat loss. So that, this is where, coming back to our different variables and also our goals, right? And so understanding that, like, I did this for a long time too, having so many different goals at once, especially when it comes to like a performance goal versus a body composition goal versus some other goal, right? Whatever it is. Those are all things that are adding stress, right? To just your overall self, right? And so that's something that I always kind of come back to when I'm thinking about, with clients or with myself going into like a fat loss phase specifically, a dedicated fat loss phase. Is this my only goal right now? Main goal, right? And so for you, for example, I would probably lean on saying that focusing a little bit more on recomp is going to probably benefit you a bit more through this training, because again, you have a performance goal that might not align with the things that you need to do to actually go into a dedicated fat loss phase. And so some of those, yes, I'm not saying that you can't lose body fat and still train for your race, but we have to realize that, like, if we're trying to prioritize multiple things at once, we're going to end up overly stressed, not just from a physiological standpoint, but also from a mental standpoint. And again, the variables come in. There's lots of different variables moving. Even if your training levels out, it's still going to be changing a bit. You're still going to be, maybe cycling a bit harder some days versus others. So it's really kind of just coming back to, like, asking yourself these questions. Is this the best time for me to go into a fat loss phase? Should I potentially just focus on getting comfortable with understanding exactly where my maintenance is right now, so that I can use that as a tool? Maybe you didn't actually know that the last time you did this, right? So using that to your advantage. And then with that, I would say, okay, if we want to lose some body fat gradually, I would probably take more of the recomp route, where you're basically looking at staying at the lower end of your maintenance and staying there for a while, but also understanding too that you likely don't want to compromise your performance as well. So this is a roundabout way of saying that, like, you have to really pick your priority, right? Is your priority, doing the best you can in this race, right? Or is your priority body composition? Because those are two completely different things. Performance and fat loss / body composition are completely different. And that's where a lot of people get mixed up, right? I did for a long time too. Does that make sense from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think it does. I think I definitely need to figure out what that maintenance level is going to be, especially as my training ramps up, because it essentially increases like an hour every week, and it goes up to like my longest ride will be 7 hours. So kind of understanding that. And then I think I'm seeing my body kind of goes into like this, I noticed, like, after my long ride, I gained weight because I get puffed up. I think it's like inflammation. So I'm like storing more water. So just even understanding how that's going to fluctuate.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
no, I think that makes sense. I can't remember if I had something else.
So I'll just say to that too, while you're kind of thinking, and again, this does come back to, like, okay, and like, I know that you mentioned in the past, you gained some weight and you were training this hard, but were you doing all the things that you're doing now, right? Were you tracking your food diligently? Were you paying attention to recovery? Were you also, lifting weights in a way that was not adding more stress, right? Because the recovery side of things is huge for you right now too. And we have to understand too that, like, if you were to go into a dedicated fat loss phase during this training, you have less recovery resources available, literally, because you're taking in less fuel. You're putting your body into a deficit. And so that's going to add a lot more stress. So I would even say that, like, it's probably not a good idea to do that in conjunction with this training. And rather, if you do want to focus on not, gaining or even still recomping, which I absolutely think is possible, I think it's really just honing in on all of those specific things within foundations or within recomp, same thing, foundations, maintenance, recomp, like all these things kind of go into hand in hand, but like the little extra 1%, right? Are you paying attention to sleep? Are you, fueling, like, are you paying attention to pre and post workout fueling, right? Making sure that you're getting that in check. Are you actually tracking, like, even on a long day where you have a long ride? I know I used to do this after triathlons. Like, it's like, oh, I just rode my bike for 5 hours. I can eat whatever I want, right? Are you tracking those days that happens, right? Just so you have that awareness of those calories, right? Another thing is, oh my gosh, what was I going to say? Just completely blanks. Again, the recovery side of things too. And I just blanked on what I was going to say. It'll come back to me, but does that make sense too? Like understanding the stress response going on too, and like how if you overly push your body, even if you are in a deficit and your body's completely stressed out, that's going to affect your hormones. That's going to affect how you're recovering. And that's going to make just fat loss in general much harder because your body's like your mind and your body's going to be saying to you like, hey, why are you doing this to me? Why are you
Yeah.
putting me in this situation? It's going to fight back against you. It's going to hold on to as much as it can. And that's, probably not going to be a good situation over the long term.
Right, right. So I guess one other question is, when I'm taking in, like, I take a lot of nutrition during my rides, that also should be tracked correctly, for my macros.
100%. Yeah. If
Yeah.
it has, and again, this comes back to like those calories count, right? Even if you're riding, I'm not saying that you should absolutely consume that fuel, but it's not like they just don't count because you're exerting energy. There's always going to be like fluctuations, right? And that's why tracking your expending energy is so hard because you don't know. Like you can guesstimate it, but you can absolutely know what you put into your mouth, right? You can track that, which is cool, right? It's actually really cool that you can actually know like, okay, this is exactly what I put in my body today from a calorie nutrition standpoint. And you literally have that on paper. So yes, absolutely tracking those things. And again, if that's something that you didn't do last time, I think that in itself was probably just like that, maybe some of the extra calories that didn't seem so extra because you were, burning them off. But over time, that extra, maybe you were in a 100-calorie surplus for like a few months, 100-calorie surplus every single day.
Mhm.
That's 700 calories a week, however many calories a month on top of maintenance. And so that's where things can start to add up that we don't really think about. So yeah, hopefully, does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. for sure.
Awesome.
All
So
right.
yeah, so I would focus on staying in foundations a bit more through April. I would really adjust this more so to, and you can put maintenance, you can put recomp. I mean, again, I do think that you're going to, especially if you're focusing on the things that we talked about, you're going to see some recomp as you establish that maintenance and as you kind of are, finding that balance between staying maybe on the lower end of maintenance, but still fueling enough that you feel good, you're recovered, all of that. So yeah, I would adjust that, and you could have a whole periodization plan for the year of February for the next few months that says maintenance. There's nothing wrong with that. Just because it says that doesn't mean that you're not working and making changes and things are moving. There's some ladies who literally their entire 2024 is maintenance and they've seen absolute changes in their body composition. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, we're about at time now. We had one more question from Sarah. She's not on today, so I'll save this question for next week. It was more so about fat loss and kind of staying within a fat loss phase after coming out of maintenance for a year. I think that's a discussion that there's a lot of things I want to talk about surrounding that. So I'd love to save that question to jump into next week at the beginning. Lawrence, if you're on here and you want to respond a little bit to Sarah in the Flex Fam, like via messaging, that would be awesome. And we can kind of pick this up next week. And hopefully Sarah can jump on then. Awesome. All right. Thank you, ladies, for coming on. Get those recordings happening. If you have to buy a tripod on Amazon, I will post a link to the one that I have, and we'll get some exercise form reviews up in the next few weeks. Awesome. All right. I hope everyone has a great rest of your night and enjoy those split squats.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.